Hi, this is Siofra Bradigan, and this is Siofra's Magic Alcove. So, you all keep asking us about how Ian and I got together, and on the live show this past week, the question was asked again. So I decided this would be a good time to do a video about our meeting, etc. And, so here we go. So the first time we met in 1991, as a little bit of a backstory, I guess it was in February that my then husband um, had me go and work at one of those 1-800-flower call centers to raise money for him to leave and move back to Santa Cruz, ostensibly to start a new massage practice and then have me and my daughter follow. So I sold a bunch of comic books. I sold some other books I had, raised money, worked extra hours, did the call center, and he took the car, his massage table, and some items, and he left. And when he got there, he called on the phone and said he wasn't coming back because if he did, he would have to kill himself, which was like, yay. I was pretty annoyed by that. Seemed like a cowardly act, but you know, he was bipolar, and I had gotten him some help with medication. And the type of bipolar he is, he remembered the highs but not the lows. And so the whole point of medication is to kind of even things out, and that doesn't go over well with that type of bipolar disorder because they don't remember the times that they were depressed and raging and everything else. They just feel like they're being dampened, their spirit is being destroyed, their essential self is utterly gone or being made to go or what have you. So I was pretty upset at the time that it happened, and I've told you all about some of the stuff that I did to help myself magically to work through the process. So it was like probably after spring equinox or right around then. So it'd been a while since he had left, and I actually recovered from the situation fairly quickly. Decided it was probably the best thing that had happened to me, and it was a very short marriage. I didn't know him for that many years. We weren't together for that long, and so it wasn't like as devastating as it can be for some people. And I was trying to get myself out of the house, out of our apartment, and I didn't have a car anymore because he took the car and kept it. And so I was sort of stuck within walking distance of wherever we lived in Medford. And I saw, I think, on a bulletin board at like a local health food store kind of thing about this pagan dessert potluck meet and greet. And I thought it sounded like a great idea, a good opportunity to get out of the house. It was a couple of miles away, but I knew I could walk the couple of miles, and so I made arrangements to go to this event. And I'm pretty funny when I'm on chocolate and sugar. So, and Ian was there with his friend Mitch, and then the people who were hosting the event were some local pagans. They actually had come from back east and had started groves and stuff there and across, and were doing classes and so forth. So I was interested in meeting them as what seemed like a established and stable group. And it was outside, and it was a nice sunny day, and we just kind of hung out, and Ian showed up with Mitch, and I was curious about him and asked some questions. Found out pretty quickly that he was currently engaged to a woman who lived in Southern California, around Disneyland area, and he told me, because I was asking a lot of questions because I liked his energy and I was curious, that that he had asked her to marry him and that he wanted to make sure she knew what she was getting into. And so he sent her a bunch of books on magic, including Crowley. He was in the OTO at the time, and some other things, and then told me she was a Mormon. And I thought, well, he's probably going to be available fairly soon. So, and he was just telling me whatever I asked, and I just asked pretty, straightforward, get to know you kind of questions. And he was moaning about how people have a bad opinion of Crowley, and most of the stories about him are incorrect, and I agreed that that was likely the case and how that must feel and so forth. Found out later that his friends were quite stunned by hearing him talk because he never talked when they were around, and later on discovered that was because no one ever asked him a question to ask him what he thought about things, and he felt that if they wanted to know his opinion, they would ask for it. So they had really no idea who he was. So I probably got to know him better in that couple hours that we were there than all the people he knew in town that he'd known for years, I would say. Sort of interesting difference in interactions and stuff. So that was before we went on our first date. And one of the first things that, trying to remember the exact order of stuff. Okay, so May Day was the next big event, so Beltane, and Mitch was going, but Ian could not go because he had somewhere else he needed to be. I think he had to go back down to Anaheim or something that weekend. So I went out there on my own, which was sort of an experience in and of itself. Um, yeah, that was one of those times when I should have listened to the spirits and I didn't. I listened to the people. It was, a weird kind of a little side trip because the spirits in the woods were kind of upset that the people were going to build a fire in the middle of the grass, and so I took it upon myself to make sure they built a fire break and were responsible and so forth. And then when it was time to jump over the fire, everybody was yelling, you can do it, you can do it, you can do it. And all the spirits were yelling, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. And I did it and almost broke my ankle. So, falling and twisting my ankle on the stuff that I had made them dig out to put around the pit to keep the fire from starting a forest fire and burning the place down. So when Ian got back from his trip, I was on crutches. I had to walk to work and work on people and stuff like that. So, it was not a fun time, but it didn't last for too long. So that was good that I ended up being able, the place I was working was in walking distance of my apartment and that kind of thing. So his friend Mitch started taking me out every weekend around this time. He would call when he got in from town, from wherever he was, which I can't remember now what he was doing. I think he was working for the Forest Service or something. Ian might remember because, he was his friend more than mine at the time. And he would like take me to the movies or take me to dinner. And from the outside, it sort of appeared like we were dating, but nothing ever happened between us. And he was sort of an odd person. I have never had to fight so hard to get a word in edgewise in my life. Going out with somebody, anybody, man or woman, he could talk you into the table and make you become unconscious rather quickly. he seemed to be trying to impress me with his knowledge of all things esoteric, um, and I would find things about his conclusions that I thought were not something I was compatible with, and I would have to fight to get in to the conversation in order to explain to him how I wasn't okay with that kind of thing. Um, I think we even went to a Native American dance thing that they had. So, we danced with the dancers. That's the closest we came to holding hands, was when we were dancing. And yeah, so it was a lot of mixed signals from him. And so yeah, that kind of led to an epiphany on my part, or a small one. But backing up a little bit, on summer solstice, we were all getting together to go to a solstice celebration outside of Ashland, Oregon. And we were all supposed to meet at a Safeway parking lot. That was according to the instructions. So Mitch and Ian and I and a guy named Fred were all in the car together. We went to wait for people to come to show us where we were going. No one ever showed up. I was dressed for a summer solstice celebration, so I was wearing my bright red belly dancing skirt and similar upper accoutrements that kind of went along with my belly dancing skirt. Not my belly dancing bra or anything, but I was definitely not dressed for any other kind of an event than a pagan event that I was expecting. And so when nobody showed up, uh, we went up to Mount Ashland to go to, there's a large Buddha there. It's about 40 feet high, I think. And there's prayer flags all the way around it. And then I guess the inside of the statue is stuffed with prayers, which is one of the things that's traditional in some of the Buddhist cultures. Or there's so many different types of Buddhism, but in this one in particular, they filled the statue with prayers. And it was a nice sunny day, perfect for a solstice celebration, which didn't happen. And we went up, decided to go for a hike. There is a Tibetan monastery on Mount Ashland that I had never been to and hadn't planned on going to, but we were walking in that direction, and suddenly there was some spirit up there and a bird that made a call that said, "Hey, come on up." And so I said, "Okay." So we went on up. Uh, Amazingly enough, they weren't really upset with how I was dressed. I felt a little bit out of place. The place was gorgeous. They had built it themselves. They did all the decorations and everything and all the carvings inside the temple, and the people were just marvelous. I really enjoyed them. They were learning Tibetan. This Tibetan master had picked this spot in the middle of some ley lines on purpose in order to assist with, our awakening or whatever. And and so it was certainly an interesting event, different than what we expected, but I thoroughly enjoyed myself and I enjoyed meeting the people. And for some reason, they figured out that Fred really didn't belong with us, and they sort of took him off on his own for a while while we were talking to other people. And then we all were back together and went back to the car and left. And there was a strange thing with Fred in the car where he wanted to give me a coin to put on my altar to send positive energy to him finding a woman. So I'm like, okay, fine, whatever. Apparently, he socked the coin full of pheromones, hoping that I would fall madly in love with him or some such thing, which was definitely not happening. Um, and I'm not sure if that was the trip that Ian talked about his staff and asked me if I could do a reading on his staff. And I said, well, yes, I think it was that trip on the way back, but that in order to do an effective reading on it, what I would like to do would be to have his staff overnight and sleep with it, because that's one of the ways I get information through my dreams and unconscious and that kind of thing. So he drove to where his staff was and picked it up and gave it to me. And his staff was a piece of lightning struck wood that he had found in the woods. And yeah, so that was really my second serious introduction into Ian and who he was sleeping with his staff. I mean, I got more information off of that. It was very intimate, really, about things that had happened to him in his past and his heart and all kinds of stuff that I don't remember now since we've been together for so long. And when I saw him next, I told him what I picked up from his staff, and apparently I was dead on, according to him. And so now we're getting towards the 4th of July, and on the 4th of July, Mitch took me to Ashland to watch the fireworks, and it was still, the energy was just still very weird. It was like every weekend he did something with me, but it just didn't feel like it was going anywhere in particular. And so that night, me and my teddy bear Amanda had a long chat about Mitch, and we're trying to decide if he was interested in us, what did we think about it. And so I looked at it sort of from the distance a little bit, perspective, and decided that his personality was very much like other men I'd been with in the past, very intense and demanding, overwhelming energy, that kind of thing. And it was very much like all the other guys that I'd known in my life, and I really wasn't interested in that kind of relationship anymore. And so I decided even if he were interested in me, then I wasn't interested in him. So that was the 4th of July. So on the 5th of July, we ended up with a double date. I guess a couple of weeks before that, Mitch heard from me that I had gone out with a neighbor friend. I decided it was time for me to get out of the house and just kind of go dancing and just enjoy myself. Not to do anything or to meet anybody, but, just to sort of be there and, just experience being out and dancing, because I love dancing. And he suggested the double date. He and Ian couldn't do it the week that me and my neighbor did it the first time because they were going down to San Francisco for an OTO initiation. Can't remember which degree it was for Ian. But so so on the 5th of July, he decided, and that was the date we had picked for Ian and him and me and my neighbor to go out together. And everyone assumed that Mitch and I were dating because we'd been going out every weekend. It's sort of a natural assumption. Of course, I didn't think that that was the case because of being there in person. And so it was a weird scenario because we went to a club to do dancing, and then we left the club and went to the theater to watch Terminator movie that came out that year. I think it was the third one. I'll have to look it up and see which one it was. Maybe it was the one where she was in the prison and pumped up and stuff. I'll have to see which one it was. I don't remember anymore. And so we were in the theater watching this very intense action flick, and then we went back to the dance club. So it was kind of this odd kind of what split in what we were doing. Not the way a normal person would have set up a scenario, I would think. But he had said he had promised he would take Ian to see this flick. In reality, he dragged Ian to see flicks. sometimes he didn't want to see, but he went along anyway. Um, and so we get back to the dance club, and I've decided after the talk I had with my teddy bear the night before that it doesn't matter to me what's really going on here. I just want to enjoy myself and have a good time. And I had noticed when Mitch and Ian first came to pick us up, Mitch was all over my neighbor. She was tall. Apparently, he was seriously into tall women. There was something about tall women that just made him go nuts. And I often say that he licked her from head to toe in the first 5 minutes. Ian thinks that's a bit of an exaggeration, but I don't really think it's much of one from what I was seeing. And he actually shoved me in the back seat with Ian before the date started and put her in the front seat with him. And then, ignored me the rest of the night, which was fine by me. I was actually kind of relieved because I was like, oh, good. I'm right. We're not dating. And so now I don't have to break up with him. So this is fantastic. And poor Marion, I think her name was, she was freaking out. She thought I was going to kick her ass, and she was stepping out on my guy or something like that. When we were at the club, I think the second time, um, and we were in the bathroom together, she was, apologizing for what was going on. She was so sorry that this was happening. And I'm like, hey, I'm a realist. I just need to know what's going on. Now I know what's going on, and this is great. I'm fine with this because, he's not into me like I was worried he might be. And so you've got my blessing. And so then Ian was incredibly shy at this point when I first met him. Um, he's still a fairly shy individual, but he was like really super, super shy about being with other people at that point. And so I really needed to encourage him to dance with me because I'm like, I'm not dancing with Mitch because he's dancing with Marion, and and I'm sitting here at the table by myself, and he's looking at the situation, and he's just thinking like, wow, this is kind of awkward and weird. And I'm just sitting there tapping my feet, and he finally says, let's get up and dance. So we get up on the dance floor, and right after we get up on the dance floor, it becomes like a slow dance, and he sits back down. He's not going to slow dance with me. So then I have to wait again. And another faster song comes up, and I get him out on the dance floor. I keep going, come on, come on, come on. And so we get up there, and then after we dance a fast dance, it turns into a slow dance, but this time I managed to keep him from going back to the table by, saying, hey, it's okay, let's dance, let's keep on dancing. And so knowing how skittish he was, it was kind of like I'm trying to lure this guy in without freaking him out, because I've already seen his heart by sleeping with his staff, and on the dance floor, he had been doing some heart chakra meditations, and I could feel it. When we first got up on the dance floor, was this wonderful energy spewing out of his heart center, and just sort of went all over my energy field. And I'm just like, ooh, I like this. I want more of this. And so I kept him out on the dance floor, and I orchestrated a couple of accidents by bumping into other people and getting a little bit closer. So by the time we were finished dancing, we were basically chest to chest. And the look on his face was actually pretty priceless. He kept looking at me like, what? How did that happen? So then we went back to her place. My place was not a good place for us to go right away. My daughter was having a party, trying to get us evicted, I believe. She was being a rebellious teenager at the time. And so we went back to Marion's place. And the most awkward situation I think I've ever been in, especially for a first time date kind of thing, Marion sat in a chair, and then Mitch sat on the floor in front of her and started rubbing her feet. And Ian sat on the other side of the chair on the floor, and I was on this side. So there was like two people, one getting their feet rubbed between us, and And I'm like, okay, now what? What the heck am I going to do here? Because I want to get more contact with him because I really like his energy. And so I'm not sure how to do this. And it's going on, dragging on for minutes and minutes and minutes. And so I took off my shoes and took off my socks or whatever I was wearing. I started wiggling my toes and I said, well, my feet are getting kind of jealous over here. And I just kind of left that hanging in the air. And it was hysterically funny. It took minutes. I mean, like maybe even 5 minutes of that statement hanging in the air. And then Ian suddenly popped up and said, well, we can't have that, can we? And then he came over and started rubbing my feet. Once that started, that was it. I ended up taking him back to my place and he spent the night. My daughter's look on her face was priceless because she thought I was dating Mitch too. And I didn't bring Mitch home. and and then from that moment on, it was like I was like, this is my guy. I know this is my guy. Whatever happens now is fine by me. Whether it lasts for a long time, whether it lasts for a short time, I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to enjoy this because this is different. This is different than any other person I've been with. And he had an apartment in Ashland. And he, I don't think, ever slept there again after that first, when I brought him home, except when I went down to Santa Cruz with my mother. There was a planned trip with my mom that, she came up and me and my daughter went down to Santa Cruz. She was taking harp lessons from this guy down there. She was seriously getting into the harp, had been getting into it for a while at that point. And so while I was gone, when I came home, I found a card on my doorstep. And I don't remember if there were flowers or not, but there was a very nice card. And then I called him up and he came over, and that's the last time he slept at his place in Ashland. And it was kind of interesting when my mother was there because we had not been together for very long. I mean, this was only a matter of a few weeks, really, when my mother showed up. And the I think it was before we left for Santa Cruz that my mother I had a morning. Let me back this up a little bit. This was the morning that I woke up in the morning to a spinning cube inside of a sphere flying through the air and smacked me in my third eye as I was waking up. Just about knocked me onto my back as I was sitting up and blew open my third eye like crazy. So I was pretty sensitive for a while after that happened. And Ian was confused that I got what he would consider a ceremonialist symbol in my head because I wasn't a ceremonial magician as far as he knew. I was a witch. And we went to the park in Ashland, and that's when I encountered the wand that bit me. I picked it up and black energy came flying up my arm and I had to put it down, and then he touched it and black energy came flying up his arm, and I wouldn't touch him until he got rid of it. And I went to a I guess a fountain that was in the park and put my hands and feet in the fountain to get that energy out. And he walked into the creek and did the same thing. He didn't feel comfortable going into the fountain. And when we got home, it was either that day or the next. It's hard to remember order of things. You know how that is? My mother was showing me pictures of her family, my family, and stuff. And in amongst all the pictures she was showing me, while she was having me flip through these pictures, she was talking about my my Uncle Bob, who molested me, my two sisters, or my brother, my sister, and tried to molest my younger sister, as well as his children. He was married to my mother's sister, so he was an uncle by marriage, I guess, is how that goes. But, I had done all these rituals to get him out of my head and to try and heal from all that stuff. And I'd worked on my emotions and my feelings and everything else. And so she's telling me that my sister had gone to New Jersey and confronted my Uncle Bob and forgiven him and had forgiven my father, and all this subtext about me not doing the same thing was pretty clear in her voice. And while I'm looking through these pictures, I came across a picture of Uncle Bob. And I started having some issues from the moment I saw the pictures, because I was not expecting to see a picture of my molester in this pile of pictures. My mother, I thought, had more brains than that, than to do that to me. And I was trying to avoid talking about it while she continued to drone on about how great my other sister was and forgiving everybody. And I felt this stuff coming up out of my stomach and trying to climb out of my throat. I was not able to stuff my feelings effectively anymore. I had lost the ability because I had healed too much. And I finally turned around and told my mother to shut up, which kind of startled her. And then I went, and I told her again, I said, shut up, and I don't want you to talk about Uncle Bob. I don't want you to show me a picture of him again. And you can talk about my sister all you want, but not about how she's forgiven everybody who's abused her. And then I walked into my room and started crying. And Ian, like, we've been together for a few weeks, he walks into that room and he sits down and he just holds me while I cry. So that was kind of a definite moment where I knew I had the right person, because his instincts were so dead on about how to behave, how to react, how to do stuff, and help me as well. And so that was sort of an amazing moment in our early relationship. So I can't remember how long it was when I finally said, "Why don't you stop paying rent on your place in Ashland, since you're not spending any time there?" And he thought, "Okay, that makes sense." So then he moved in officially. And I was working as a massage therapist, and I had a client who was a Kenpo instructor, and he really needed the massage for his health, and he was having a hard time covering as much of it as he actually needed. So I agreed to do a trade and take lessons. I wasn't in the least bit interested in Kenpo, but Ian was, so that was fine. And so we were going to classes on a regular basis. So let's see, we had our date on the 5th of July, so it was probably in September or October, maybe even November, October, November, somewhere in there, that he asked me to marry him. And he did it in the cutest way possible, in my opinion. He thinks it's lame, but I didn't think it was lame. We were getting ready to go to our Kenpo class, and so I'm getting our gis together and stuff like that for our class, and he has been reading a book on chess, which I'm not in the least bit interested in. I don't like the game. I know everyone says it's so great. I don't like it. And so I'm not really listening to him talking about chess moves and stuff like that, except with like half an ear. Because really, okay, fine, whatever. Talk about whatever you need to, but I'm not going to absorb this because I don't care about the game. And so then he said, and one of the things I've noticed about all of these moves is that the purpose of them is to limit the options of the other player. And then he says, I've been thinking of limiting your options. And then all of a sudden I'm like, what? And then I realized where he was heading with this. And so I threw him on the bed and I says, I'm sorry, but you can't ask me to marry you and then go to a class. You'll understand we're not going to Kenbo tonight. And so that's when we got engaged, I guess. Uh, and we got married in May the following year. So our first date was the 5th of July in 91, and we were married by officially by May 23rd of 92. So it seems pretty quick on the face of it, but then again, we've been together ever since. So clearly it was the right thing for us. Whether it's the right thing for everybody, who knows, but I was at just the right point in my life, and he was obviously the person I was waiting for, that I didn't know I was waiting for. And ironically, at the time that we had that date, both of us had decided to forget about getting into a relationship. We were both of us had been on the same page. He had broken up with the woman in Anaheim. I had, I think, started divorce proceedings with my ex. And it was a pretty quick process because it didn't take much time to do because he wanted it, and wanted to get rid of me. And so yeah, so we were both available at the time that we went on our date, which I wouldn't have pursued if he'd still been in a committed relationship potentially with someone else, because I've been on the other side of that, and I was just not. It was like my thought process was, that's too bad because I really like him, but he's not available, so moving on. And I had decided that if the rule was to be with someone, you had to be with a jerk, then I was much happier on my own, and I was just going to be by myself. And he had sort of decided the same thing, because she was kind of crazy. And yeah, so I started making my dress, I think, in January. And it took me all 5 months to get the dress made. But it was a marvelous time in spring equinox of 92. We had picked our hand fasting ritual. It was from the Crystal Wells books, um, and we just both really liked it a lot. And so that was one of the things we were getting ready to do. And he needed a sword, but he already had one because he was a ceremonial magician, so swords were already on the table. And I needed a jewel for my part of the ceremony to swear my devotion, fealty, and whatever to him, to show him my jewel, my heart, kind of thing. And I wasn't sure what I was going to have, what kind of jewel I would get, or what would be appropriate at all. And the dress I was making was a rose-colored dress, which is a traditional Celtic wedding dress color. I picked that on purpose because of that. And when we went to, I had this sudden urge to go to Mount Shasta on the equinox, just because it was like the beginning of a new year, new spring, new energy, and all that other stuff. And Mount Shasta isn't that far from Medford. You can drive there in, I think, about 3 hours or so to get there from there. And so we got there, and I didn't have anything in particular planned. I just wanted to be up there on the mountain and sort of say hi to the world and acknowledge the spring. There was still a fair amount of snow on Mount Shasta that weekend, and so you couldn't go all the way up. You had to stop partway down. And so we went as far as we could and just were out there for a while, and then we were on our way down. I was driving at that point, so I pulled into one of the overlooks because it's got a really nice view of the valley, and I just thought that'd be a nice place to just kind of gaze out over the world and say hey. And we pulled into the parking lot, and there were already some people who were there, and they were doing a ritual. They had these crystals out on the snow, so I definitely wanted to make sure that we didn't interrupt what they were doing. So we sort of hung back and waited for them to be finished, and just hanging out there. And they got in their car, and I saw them leave, and they went down the mountain, and so then we did our thing, just a spontaneous kind of talk to the universe, hey spring thing. Don't remember anything about it except that it was, that kind of thing. And then I heard a car coming back up the mountain, and it pulled into where we were, and I looked at it, and I'm like, aren't those the people that were here when we arrived? Because, like, that's the same car. And then one of the women jumps out of the vehicle and runs over to us and says, the love between you two is just so wonderful. We had to come back and give you this. And she handed me a rose quartz heart. And I was just like, wow, that's amazing. And Ian says, this kind of stuff never happens to me. And I said, well, it happens to me all the time, so now it's going to happen to you too. So I had the stone jewel for our hand fasting in May. So, yeah. And it was, my mom came out. She brought one of her harps with her. She played an Irish wedding march kind of thing as we were walking up the path to go up to the top of this hill. We had found this place it in the spring, and it was all green and wonderful. And by May 23rd, it was all dried up. It looked like practically a desert. Very different when we went back, but it was nice and isolated, and it was just right outside of town. It was one of the small little hills, mountains, or whatever outside of Medford. And so it was perfect for us. And, we did the hand fasting ritual there, and we had just a few close friends. Mitch was there. My friend Shay, who's now in Portland, was there. She was my high priestess. The guy I was working with, who was not a nice person, and I didn't care for him much, but he had a minister's license, so he could sign the paperwork, was there. And, some of our close friends. And my daughter was there. And my son was there. He came up from Santa Cruz. He stayed in Santa Cruz when I moved up to Oregon. And a funny thing about him and the piano, the day before the wedding, he went missing. And I had to go find him. So I'm like, where could my son be? And the local Safeway had installed a piano for people to just play if they wanted to. And so I went over there, and sure enough, he was sitting there playing the piano. And yeah, and he didn't notice people were giving him tips. He just left it all there and came back. So that was kind of a typical my son kind of moment. So, family was there. And it was just a wonderful ceremony. We had a weekend. And in the midst of this, like starting in January, where Ian was working was pretty clear that it wasn't going to stay open. It had been sold to someone else who wanted to change the business completely. It was a typewriter repair business that was catering to the students across the street, the university students that were still using, you know, not so much computers yet, but it was in the beginning phases of going from typewriters to computer keyboards and that kind of thing. And Ian was good at fixing them and whatnot. And so we had started looking for another job for him. And just before the wedding, we got a call from the state of Oregon saying that he had gotten the job with the state if he would move to the coast. And so they wanted him to start working the day after our wedding. And he said, well, I'm getting married on Sunday. And they said, well, we'll give you an extra week because, you deserve a honeymoon and a bit of a break. So he started working the week after. And so when we got the word that he actually had the job and everything, uh, that Friday before the wedding, actually, was his last day at work. And so he had gone to work, I guess, earlier in the week, and his boss had given him the bad news that he was fired or being let go. And he says, "Oh, good," because I wasn't sure how I was going to tell you. I'm getting married on Sunday and I have a new job. I'm starting the following week. And so he was very happy for that. And this guy, Fred, who had been in the car, who gave me the weirdly pheromoned silver dollar, who Ian had sort of taken under his wing before I met him, and had been trying to lead him out of the idea of using magic to kill his ex-wife, which is what he was looking for. Uh, he was definitely an odd individual, and Ian had just gotten to the point where he pretty much was giving up on the whole project. And the last day that Ian worked there, on that Friday before our marriage, um, Fred came to visit in the store. And then Ian left, and he put the key through the mail slot when he left because he wasn't supposed to keep the key. That's what the owner wanted him to do. And then we went out to dinner to celebrate our upcoming nuptials and his getting out of his job and a new job coming. It just seemed like a good thing. And when we got home, we had, I don't know how many messages on our answering machine, which we still had at the time, from the police department and the hospital. We were desperately trying to find out how to get back into the store because Fred had left his antipsychotic medication in his bag in the store. And it was like, wow, this is so bizarre. So he called the police back and he says, "Well, I can't help you because I put my key through the slot and I no longer have access to the building, and here is the owner's number." And so it seemed like the universe was paying him back somehow for he was not the greatest guy and sicked weird Fred on him. And as we were going out the door, it just seemed somehow karmic and perfect at the time. And we still sort of think of it fondly that way. It's like, that was just so interesting how that happened. It's like, we couldn't have planned that any better. I don't think it would be possible to plan a revenge like that. So it really wasn't a revenge, but it just kind of happened. And so then we moved to the coast and left most of all those people behind. And it certainly was quick when it started, and it's been interesting. My granddaughter was born the following year in May on 1993, and I was working here. I had a massage practice here, and she was born in Wairika, so that was one of those marathon drives without stopping to go pee. Once my daughter called to let me know she was in labor, I wanted to make sure I got there in time. So that was awesome as a different kind of experience altogether. Funny thing, when Ian and I first got together, his friend Mitch, I'd been seeing every weekend, suddenly stopped coming around, like for months, and we were kind of baffled by that. And then Ian, I think, cornered him and asked him what was going on, why he wasn't coming around, and Mitch said, "Well, I didn't want it to get awkward." And we're like, "Awkward? Like, how could it get awkward? Nothing happened." And then he proceeded to tell Ian that he thought that I was a little bit too free with my opinion. And I thought that was hysterical. I started laughing when he told me that. I says, "I've never worked so hard to get a word in edgewise in my life as I have with that man." So every opinion I had to force it out because he wasn't going to let me have any. So it was kind of interesting that he thought somehow that there was something there, even though he was so blatant with another woman. I'm not sure if he thought I was going to be an acolyte of his or he was holding me in reserve for some time in the future. It was kind of strange. We've kind of lost touch with him at this point because, yeah, he's definitely not been around for quite a while at this point in our lives. So that was pretty much all the stuff that was going around the time we got together and then got married and so forth. So I think that's a full enough picture for everybody. Um, just to sort of give you a context. And certainly we've gone through plenty of stuff like every couple has. There have been ups and downs. There have been difficulties for us to face together. There have been crazy psychics who tried to break us up and said we were getting divorced, which I wouldn't take in at all because I said that's not happening. Um, and and I really value our relationship. I value our differences as well as our similarities. And I've said it before, he's the first person I've met who actually saw me instead of saw the reflections that I thought he wanted to see. He insisted on seeing me, period, and that was all he was interested in. And he's always been upfront about who he is. And so trust was something that didn't come, it wasn't difficult to build because he's always been completely himself. And as a consequence, I was able to be completely myself, which is like just so wonderful for an empath. It can be hard for us to be able to do that. So, yeah. So that's our origin story, I guess. There might be other little things that I remember later, but you can all ask about any of them. And, but, it gives you some background on us and how we met. And Ian certainly was already into magic when I met him and was in the OTO, as he has stated. And he stayed in it until, well, we were living in this house, I think, when he finally decided to stop being a member. So, um, and I had been on my witchy path ever since I can remember and had been officially, doing stuff for years before I met him. So we were well formed individuals on our magical path and whatnot. And so, we have illuminated each other on our various parts of what we understand and what we know. And it's just been good all around. It's, I think a good relationship is not something that you have to fight for. I think that's one of the things the movies like because it makes it all that more dramatic. And I hate those movies where the people that are fighting in the beginning are the ones that are going to get together in the end. I'm like, what? That makes no sense to me at all. Oh, yeah, they're going to start kissing now that they're yelling and screaming at each other for 10 minutes. Yeah, bad modeling of behavior, in my opinion, but, that's me. So, I guess that's it for this video. And I hope you are all doing extremely well in your various lives and finding the things that you need and are with the people you need to be with. So, this has been Siofra's Magic Alcove, and I'm Siofra Bradigan. Blessed be.